I feel like I'm making a warrior update every other Tuesday at this point, but people find up stuff again. We gotta talk about it. I was looking at the rankings for VFD, you know, DPS rankings right there, and everything looked more or less normal, you know. There was a rogue there, a bunch of warriors, nothing too crazy, but then I saw this guy right here. Look at this. Ahlaundoe. 247 DPS average. What the heck is going on here? I had to find out, so I looked this guy up and find out I did. I tracked him down. He's a speedrunner and a Twitch streamer too. I will link his Twitch on the description for you. Out of professional courtesy, I will not be using his footage for the stream. I will show you some screenshots of what he's doing, so you follow me when I'm explaining the thing every so often. But here's the thing. He plays nothing like we've seen so far. He will regularly swap from a two-hander weapon to a dual-wielding weapon depending on the encounter, and he is regularly double the DPS as the second best DPSer in his raid. First of all, let's be clear here. He is cheesing meters, no question about it, alright? You do not get 400 DPS if you're not abusing some sort of strategy to get these numbers. How is he getting 400 DPS on Lady Zarabes? He is cleaving the ad alongside Lady Zarabes. Of course, you would never do that in a normal raid, you just burn the boss. But he is doing all this sort of stuff to get the highest possible numbers. It is kinda crazy though, because all he needs is an epic sword and he is pulling as much DPS as a hunter in Molten Core pretty much. You are gonna see a lot of these cheesing strategies if you check out his VODs, and while there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that, by the way, I don't think there's nothing wrong with that, I will not talk about those things because it's a little pointless. The talents he is running are still pretty standard. We know that he's running deep wounds because you can see the VOD where he procs it, and I think he's running something similar to this, and then he's taking 3 points in cruelty because he also has a lot of crit. And you may be wondering, why am I putting points in parry here? This is just a speculation on my part, guys. Of course, you cannot inspect people's talents in vanilla for some reason, but if you see on his VODs, he will intentionally, or maybe not intentionally, maybe he just rips off threat, but he will be pulling threat off the boss every so often, and I'm like, why is he doing this? And my best guess is he's probably trying to get extra rage to do even more damage. And if you see right here, parry haste, that's why I am speculating, we don't know, I am speculating that he is taking parry here. He may be taking heroic strike. He barely uses heroic strike at all. If you barely have to with this build, you're gonna see in a minute. Whether he takes parry or not, it does seem like the healers are in on the whole situation. They are healing him right away. I guess the raid knows he's trying to do this for the meters, which is fine. So yeah, if you got a lot of parry, you got a lot of rage, you got a lot of damage, that's great. And why is he not using heroic strike? Okay, it's mainly because of this rune right here, consumed by rage. He is running this rune all the time. It gives you, after you hit 80 rage, it gives you 20% more damage and it enrages you. That's the important part, because when you are enraged, you can use Raging Blow over here. This does 100% weapon damage. Might sound a little silly for a dual wielder, but you're gonna see in a minute. And finally, depending on whether he is dual wielding or two-handing, because he is gonna swap from one to another in between fights, he may be taking Quick Strike or Single-Minded Fury. Single-Minded Fury, check this out, it is 10% damage, period, any damage, even if spell damage, and that may sound silly, but there's an important reason for that distinction. Okay, this is a dual-wielding build right here, and if you want a two-handed, you are gonna go with, right here, Quick Strike. So I'm gonna tell you first when you go two-handed and when you go dual wield. First of all, if the boss is immune to bleeding, you are not gonna use a two-hander, you're gonna go dual wield. And that is because deep wounds scales of weapon damage, that's why you take a big two-hander for most of the fights. It doesn't apply to things that are immune to bleeding. So in Aquanis you're gonna be dual wielding, and dual wielding is stopping the damage for one very important reason. There is a clue right here. He is dual wielding two swords from BFD. The Hound, Darkwater, Talbar, whatever that is, it has a proc to do shadow damage, and his offhand, which is also fast, that is important to proc as many deep wounds as possible. it has another proc to do 10 damage. Now the weapons are pretty good, they are the best in the game, but the benefits are actually more than that, because remember, you can put a sharpening stone on your offhand and you can still benefit of Wind Fury, and that will more or less offset all the hit penalty. But secondly, single-minded Fury affects proc damage too, so he has a 10% bonus on top of all that damage. Every time you get a proc with your weapon for a Shadow Bolt or whatever, you get 10% extra value on that. And he is using a very weird ability to get as many procs as possible. So what is the rotation, okay? You first try to get 80 rage as soon as possible, of course, to get your consumed by rage. And here is why being in a speedrunning guild like he is so important, because if you stop at every boss to check the loot, if you're not pulling everything right away, if you're stopping to drink, this build will not work. Let me make that clear. This is why I never recommended this build before, because of this reason. To most people, to most guilds, this build does not make any sense. But since he is in a speedrunning guild, not only he chain pulls everything, his guild is constantly helping him out, carrying one mob with him to keep him in combat, stuff like that. And that means he is full rage at pretty much every boss. And if you have that much rage, the rotation is pretty easy, but he will also use rage potions on cooldown. So many of them actually that he will never refresh his shadow resistance potion. He will take one before the raid starts, and he will not take another one on Kelris or anything. So he's relying on his healers to keep him alive, basically. Anyway, once you hit 80 rage, every 12 seconds you gotta do it to refresh your buff of consumed by rage. You just hit 80 rage and you use Raging Blow on cooldown, that's your main ability. And if you are dual wielding, you are gonna spam Hamstring on cooldown to get Wind Fury procs and to get the many weapon procs that he's trying to get. Also another caveat, if you do not have a tank warrior, you're gonna have to stack Sunders on the boss yourself. It's not a big deal, just replace Hamstring with Sunder Armor until you get the 5 stacks. And that is pretty much it. You can execute, he does execute actually, but you gotta watch out, you cannot really spam Boom Boom it, because you gotta get 80 rage. So you gotta do an 80 rage execute or something like that, which is not ideal, but yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. If you are rage capping, you can do Heroic Strike on top of that to get a little bit more damage. It very rarely happens. You can two-hand with this build. As a matter of fact, he uses Deadly Strike of the Hydra for many fights. And most importantly, every time you have to cleave, he will use Deadly Strike of the Hydra. In that case, your rotation is quite similar. You still wanna get 80 rage every 12 seconds, and you still spam Raging Blow on cooldown. But remember, we also have Quick Strike instead of Hamstring now, so we are gonna use that as a rage dump. The real beauty of this build is that he found a way to get the best of both worlds. He can get a two-hander and cleave when he needs to cleave for more damage, and then he just dual wields when he is a single target fight. Overall, this build can teach you an interesting concept about raiding in general. That is that if you take a player and you take the same player with the same gear and the same skill and you drag him into a really good guild, he's gonna perform better. Why is that? This build, and of course ahlaundoe, he can pull insane damage like this because he is in a guild that allows him to do that. They are actively killing everything very fast, they are actively stacking mobs together cleanly so he can clip them all at the same time. They are even taking extra mobs so he can do more damage on them, and they are even letting him pull aggro on the boss just so he can get more rage for himself. This build is probably not the best for you, but goddamn, isn't it nice to see somebody do 400 DPS at level 25. Massive shout out to ahlaundoe. I'm gonna put his Twitch in the description. He's in Sartes guild, so you may have seen him in his stream, but right now he is the best warrior in the planet, so you definitely wanna go check him out. Also subscribe, leave a like, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.